So as you all know, lately, the Democratic Party establishment has been especially vocal about their desire to protect democracy because they are suing WikiLeaks and Russia for allegedly meddling in the 2016 elections. In fact, let's hear what DNC Chairman Tom Perez had to say about them wanting to protect elections.
That's what we believe in as Democrats. Elections should be fair.
Okay, so if you believe that elections should be fair, then let me ask you this, Tom. When Bernie Sanders defeated Hillary Clinton in New Hampshire by 14 points, was it fair that they both walked away with the same number of total delegates? Since Hillary Clinton already got 6 superdelegates to commit to her before anyone in the state even casted their vote? Do you really think that's fair, Tom? Of course it's not fair. Anyone with a brain knows that that's not fair. So while the Democratic Party continues to virtue signal about how much they care about democracy, I find it really strange that none of them have come out to denounce superdelegates, because we all know about the ongoing civil war within the Democratic Party, and one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest concerns for the Sanders wing of the party is superdelegates. So why wouldn't Democratic Party leaders who purport to care about democracy come out and denounce superdelegates? Why wouldn't they call for at least a reduction in superdelegates if they care so much about democracy? It's really curious. I mean, Tom Perez certainly won't commit to cutting superdelegates. Nancy Pelosi won't either, nor will any other Democratic Party leader. Nobody's spoken out against this, in spite of their insistence that they care so much about democracy. So how can you continue to claim to care about democracy and the fairness of elections if you refuse to come out and denounce superdelegates, which is an institution that's inherently unfair? It makes no sense, right? So apparently Bernie Sanders agrees with me, and what his team is trying to do is force members of the Democratic Party, particularly Democratic Party leaders, to come out and show their cards and finally, once and for all, denounce superdelegates. Because according to BuzzFeed's Ruby Kramer, a top Bernie Sanders official is asking Democratic leaders, including Hillary Clinton, to sign a draft letter recommitting to vastly shrinking or effectively eliminating the party's controversial superdelegate system and ultimately changing the presidential nominating process. The Sanders ally, his former campaign manager Jeff Weaver, is in talks with Clinton's team about the letter and also plans to solicit signatures from House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democratic National Committee Chair Tom Perez, and DNC Vice Chair Representative Keith Ellison, according to 2 people familiar with the undertaking. The effort to make Democratic primaries more fair, a process that has spanned 2 years, 2 committees, and dozens of arcane rules about how to make changes to the rules, is nearing its long-awaited end. Next month, the party's Rules and Bylaws Committee convenes to begin drafting the final language that DNC members will or will not approve in a vote this summer. Committee members remain divided on the idea of a 60% reduction. Some, like longtime party leader Leah Daughtry, support eliminating superdelegates altogether on a first ballot convention vote. Others see superdelegates as a crucial part of the primary system, a safeguard against nominees like President Trump, said one Rules and Bylaws member, Elaine Camark, a DNC member who has studied presidential politics for years. So I love this. I think that this is a brilliant move because as they continue to tell us how much they care about democracy, Bernie Sanders is saying, look, you care about democracy? Well, now's the time to put up or shut up. Sign this letter. It's a simple thing you can do to tell us that you really care about democracy and you're consistent. Even if superdelegates would hurt the establishment's chances at maintaining the status quo, well, what matters really is democracy, right? Isn't that the ultimate goal, to make sure that elections are free and fair? So why won't you sign this letter? And it's incredibly apparent that they don't want to sign this letter, and they are avoiding it like the plague. Because, I mean, think about this. It doesn't behoove them to sign this, because if they unequivocally take a stand against superdelegates, then they're really giving up a portion of their power that is needed for them to rig primaries. But I mean, if they don't condemn superdelegates, it also hurts them still because they look like frauds, especially after they continue to harp away about the need to protect democracy and ensure that elections remain free and fair. And what Bernie Sanders' team is doing here is backing them into a corner and basically forcing them to take a stand. No more fence sitting. If you care about democracy, then show it right now. Now, as I alluded to, they're not even recognizing the existence of this letter. In fact, interestingly enough, spokespeople for Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer claim to have no knowledge of this letter, and we also have yet to hear from Hillary Clinton or the DNC or Tom Perez. And I find this absurd because, let me remind you, Bernie Sanders is already compromising. Superdelegates is an institution that is so unfair, is so inherently undemocratic that it should be abolished entirely. But Bernie Sanders is already compromising, saying, look, I'm not even calling on you to completely abolish superdelegates, just reduce them. And they can't even do that. They are the biggest hypocrites ever. They continue to care so much about democracy, or claim that they care about democracy, rather, and they refuse to even do something simple. A symbolic gesture that shows that they're in support of reducing superdelegates. If Nancy Pelosi were to hypothetically sign this letter saying she supports even the abolition of superdelegates, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that the DNC members voting would listen to what Nancy Pelosi says and just automatically abolish superdelegates. So, I mean, really, this would be inconsequential for people like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to come out and condemn, but they can't even do that. They can't even do the smallest gesture ever to prove to us that they care about democracy. And I want to go back to some of these arguments in favor of keeping superdelegates. What DNC Rules and Bylaws member Elaine Carmick says, she wants to keep superdelegates in order to stop a candidate like Donald Trump from becoming the Democratic Party's nominee. So you're literally admitting here that you are against democracy. You're saying here, you're admitting to all of us that if there's a candidate that you don't like that wins the Democratic Party nominee, the party should be able to overthrow the will of voters. So you're against democracy. You're making an argument that's inherently authoritarian. Let me remind you that democracy is literally in the Democratic Party's name, so this should be a no-brainer for them. But here you have members of the DNC Rules and Bylaws Committee admitting that the establishment should be able to unilaterally undermine the will of voters if they opt for a candidate they don't like. Well, guess what? Sometimes candidates who you don't like win. That's just one of the many consequences of democracy. So either you're for democracy or against it. This issue is very black and white. But apparently, some DNC members are taking a stand against democracy. Now, again, we don't necessarily know if Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer will sign this letter or Hillary Clinton. We don't know. But what we do know is that they haven't done that yet, and that they are dragging their feet and trying to pretend that this letter doesn't exist. And that in and of itself is incredibly telling.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.